mornings are, well, everything your morning should be.
Let's do it!
Let's go! CBS Mornings, starting at 7.
Hi, everyone. I'm Scott McFarland, coming to you from our Washington, D.C. bureau. It's good to be with you. We thank you for joining us. Here's a look at some of the stories we're watching right now. Lawyers for former President Trump and the Department of Justice face off in court. What we're learning about legal strategy, evidence, and whether or not a third-party observer might be brought in. We're live in Florida with the latest. Despite multiple efforts to avoid it, South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham will have to appear before a Georgia grand jury to face questions about efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election. The news comes just a day after Trump-aligned attorney John Eastman pleaded the fifth in front of the same grand jury. Mississippi's governor is telling residents of Jackson do not drink the water for the fourth day in a row. What state and federal officials are saying about when people living in the state's capital city may be able to not only get drinking water, but flush their toilets and take showers again. And later this hour, former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin loses a bid to return to the political arena to Democrat Mary Peltola, who will serve in that role for a matter of months. Why we'll likely see a redo of this contest and why one Republican senator is already crying foul. We begin tonight with a federal judge holding a hearing on whether or not to appoint an outside legal expert called a special master to review the documents seized from former President Trump's home last month. After listening to arguments from both sides, the judge did not yet rule on the issue. Instead, the judge said she'd make a decision on the issue in due course. The government argued the appointment of a special master is not needed because they've already reviewed the documents. Former President Trump's legal team requested the appointment of the outside expert last week. For more on this, Nicole Skanga joins us now from West Palm Beach, Florida. She's CBS News' Homeland Security and Justice reporter. All right, Nicole, you were in the courtroom for this hearing. What arguments did you hear the legal team for former President Trump making in favor of this special master idea?
Scott, good to be with you. And fiery arguments on both sides of the aisle today. You mentioned it, the judge here not ruling from the bench, so we await her decision in due order. The Trump team starting off their argument today by saying there needs to be a temperature lowering, that we need to lower the temperature here. They likened the FBI's seizure of documents to, quote, overdue library books. We should point out for the benefit of our viewers, we are talking about hundreds of documents with classification markings. So this is unlike the cookbook that is 2 weeks overdue on my counter back at home. But lawyers for the Trump team here beating around the bush when it came to discussions of what sort of privilege they're trying to invoke, why they feel a special master needs to be brought in, an outside expert to look through some of these documents and assess whether there is any privileged information in them. Ultimately, lawyers saying they believe there is information covered by attorney-client privilege and by executive privilege. Now, the judge did push Team Trump on the question of why is there more irreparable harm to the former president in this case if a special master is not brought in, then possible delays to the Department of Justice's ongoing criminal investigation. The Trump team didn't seem to answer that question, saying that they are flying blind because they're not sure exactly what was taken during the August 8th seizure of documents from the FBI and other materials. We should get an answer, or perhaps a more satisfying answer to that question later today, though, Scott, because the judge did order a more fulsome inventory of documents seized to be unsealed, and we are awaiting that document, too.
What other arguments did the Department of Justice make today against appointing this special master?
Well, you laid it out there. One of the arguments that was made by Jay Bratt, counsel for the government, was we've already done a review of documents for attorney-client privilege in this case. The lawyers for the government also arguing here that executive privilege is not a relevant argument or a legitimate argument from Team Trump. Jay Bratt, a government lawyer, saying, quote, Mr. Trump is no longer president, and because he is no longer president, he should not have taken those documents, saying that, of course, the FBI privilege team has already sorted through documents from the former president's office. They have already identified what they're calling a small subset of those documents with attorney-client privilege potentially. So the work there is done, Scott.
From your read of things, Nicole, which side did the judge appear more convinced by during the actual arguments today?
Well, Scott, it's always difficult to read judicial tea leaves, so to speak, but the federal judge in this case expressing skepticism on both sides. She did not seem deterred from what has been a preliminary intent to allow a special master to review some of the documents here. But again, issuing that written order later. It could come today. It could come tomorrow. Now, the judge did point out, and I thought this was quite interesting, she seemed open to the idea of a special master potentially reviewing some of these documents, while simultaneously the Office of the Director of National Intelligence continuing its own assessment of national security risks. And so one of the concerns expressed by the government here was that ODNI review would have to come to a halt if a special master was in fact appointed. The judge here seeming to say, the Department of Justice would need to enjoin or temporarily halt its investigation into potential criminal wrongdoing, but she would be happy to see ODNI continue its review. Now, she hasn't officially, appointed a special master. She hasn't made a final decision here, but she did seem open to that possibility of sort of splitting the difference.
What did we learn about the potentially privileged documents they found August 8th?
Yeah, this was interesting, Scott. We expected to hear from the usual lawyers from the Department of Justice. We expected to hear from lawyers representing the former president, two new attorneys representing what's known as the FBI's filter team. And those are the officials that are sorting through the material that is seized. We heard from two lawyers representing that team today, and they spoke about a special privilege team that had sorted through documents from the former president's office to try to identify any information that could possibly contain, details that were protected by attorney-client privilege. And they found that, in this preliminary review, there were 520 pages that contained language that was, quote, legal in nature or had an identifiable attorney name attached to it. Now, those 520 pages, according to lawyers representing the FBI's filter team, were composed of 64 sets of materials. We're still waiting to learn more about exactly what was in those papers, though, Scott.
Did you leave court with any estimate on when a ruling is going to happen?
We don't know exactly when a ruling is going to happen. Of course, we know this is a high-profile case, and that was not lost on federal Judge Eileen Cannon today. We are keeping an eye on the docket. I know you will too, Scott. We're also keeping an eye on the docket, as I mentioned earlier, for the unsealing of a more fulsome, a more detailed inventory of what the FBI seized during their August 8th search of Mar-a-Lago. We know from the unsealed search warrant that there was a handwritten note from the former president. There was an executive grant of clemency for one of his associates, Roger Stone. There was what was referred to as information on the president of France. We have a lot of questions about what exactly all of those things and more mean. We should get an answer to that question in the coming hours when that document is unsealed on the docket.
In West Palm Beach, Nicole Skanka, thank you very much. For more on this, Dan Meyer joins us now, national security lawyer and a former intelligence officer. He's also managing partner at the law firm Tully Rinke. All right, Dan, how do former President Trump's public comments about this Mar-a-Lago search compare to what we're hearing from the attorneys, either in the arguments or in their court papers?
Well, the president's been dismissive of the actual need for the proceeding, and he's making a case, I think, against himself. The bottom line is these were classified documents, and there's no reason why classified documents should be in an unsecure place. In the normal course of things, as in the case of the Nixon administration, they provided a separate skiff for President Nixon when he wanted to write his memoirs. All of that was well known within the White House in the last administration. There are archivists in the White House advising the political staff every day on the packaging up and shipping of documents. So the president's trying to make this something other than what it is, which is a case of unlawful removal of classified documents. It's more like John Deutsch's situation when he was director of CIA. Sandy Berger was deputy national security advisor, was doing some work for one of the commissions and took classified documents out of the archives. That's what the focus actually is in truth, but the president's trying to politicize it, and that's for a different agenda.
Well, the former president has a history of dragging out legal cases, of creating delays and counterfilings. Can you do that against the Department of Justice?
Well, I think he's actually might have a tactical victory in that sense if he gets a special master, because that would be dragging us out, at least for the short term. I really don't think the Justice Department is all that keen to move fast on any proceeding that it's moving in, especially under this Attorney General. So I don't really know that dragging it out really plays against what they want to do. And in the end of the game, if you remember some of these other cases, the people who were eventually charged were charged with a misdemeanor. And so I don't know, even if they found Donald Trump to have committed a misdemeanor, I don't know how much that would have impacted him politically. So the delay, the slow roll, may actually benefit both sides.
So in a post on social media Wednesday, Mr. Trump seemed to acknowledge there were sensitive documents in that picture the Department of Justice released, though he previously had said the items may have been planted by agents. Does this get simple for the Department of Justice that he's saying something that seems incriminating?
Well, that speaks to something that has not been discussed generally, which is there's got to be at least one or two strata of people below the former president who handled these documents. And the question is whether they knew they were classified. Kind of hard to not know they were classified given those cover sheets, and whether they had some intent. And the intent, of course, is what everybody's trying to figure out. And I think that list, that index, could give some idea of what the intent was in removing the documents if they are grouped into certain categories. But there are people below the president that may be liable, and he may be able to push off his own personal liability with the type of idea of a plant or something of that nature. But the plant would have to be from his own staff. These were handled by his own people, and I don't understand the rationale behind his own loyal acolytes planting classified documents on it.
Dan, as a former intelligence agent, what do you make of the documents, the types of documents revealed so far, and the fact that agents needed additional security clearances just to gather what was at Mar-a-Lago?
Well, I have to be careful not to speak on anything during my time on the DNI staff, which was between 2012 and 2018. But in general, the concern on the intelligence community side is going to be with the protection of their sources. And then on the diplomatic side, on the State Department side, particularly with Macron, there's going to be concerns about what's in those documents that may leak out and embarrass us with respect to our allies. The French are still technically an ally. So there's a lot of equities at play in this, and each agency that has information in those whatever 30 boxes I think I've heard some totals of is probably right now going through their operations and trying to find out who needs to be protected, what systems need to be protected, because with the intelligence game, it's not so much the intelligence you collect on your foreign adversaries that is really important, because often that's very dated very quickly. It's the means by which you collect it that you need to protect, and that's what this is placed in danger. And my big fear is that these documents were out of the control of the federal government for a very long time. Somebody very well could have Xeroxed 30 boxes of documents in that time period, and there could be a whole shadow set of boxes somewhere that they didn't get control of soon enough. And we could have 10 or 15 years of these things dribbling out in various ways.
Well, there is polling, Dan. 59% of Americans say the former president acted inappropriately handling the classified documents after leaving the White House. It's a recent Quinnipiac poll showing that. So the law is supposed to be independent of public opinion in theory. From your experience, your long service, is that true? Is that how it works? The law remains independent of public opinion?
Well, I think the law, I think public opinion does affect it at certain times. And look at past cases. There was a pardon for Scooter Libby, the Vice President's Chief of Staff. He had leaked a identity of one of our covered individuals, and he was pardoned actually by Donald Trump. There were only misdemeanors for the former director of the CIA and for the former deputy national security advisor. I think some of that was elite opinion, people wanting to give people, members of the inside the Beltway crowd, a break. But I do think public opinion, and this is really kind of a sad commentary, public opinion could sway this so that there's a soft pedal by the Justice Department. And then you have to wonder, well, what do you tell Reality Winner or John Kiriakou or Ed Snowden, who all had similar problems with handling classified information, and some of them actually did prison time.
Dan Meyer, thanks for joining us and sharing your expertise. We thank you.
Have a good evening.
President Biden is delivering a primetime speech tonight on the state of democracy in the U.S. The president is expected to continue a new strategy of calling out MAGA Republicans and the threat he says they pose to America. Mr. Biden will deliver the speech in the battleground state of Pennsylvania, just 9 weeks out now from the midterm elections. CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes is in Philadelphia ahead of these remarks. Nancy, the White House is billing this as a major address. Is it going to be a major address, and what are the themes?
The themes, according to this White House, Scott, are the battle for the soul of America. I mean, that sounds very dramatic, and that is exactly the tone that they are hoping to strike here. They are looking to set out a major dichotomy between this president and his party and what he believes and what they say are MAGA Republicans who are striking at the soul of American democracy. Now, that is a very serious charge. What do they mean by that? Well, according to White House officials, they say things like denying the results of the last election, downplaying the violence on January 6th, pushing to make voting more difficult for certain segments of the population in certain states, promoting violence. They point to very specific examples in recent days and weeks of GOP lawmakers who have either egged on acts of violence or refused to condemn them. They say all of this points to a problem with MAGA Republicans. And the president is going to try to argue that this isn't all Republicans. It's simply those who follow the philosophy of President Trump. But that's kind of a distinction without a difference, frankly. As you know, Scott, from covering Capitol Hill, MAGA Republicans are the ones who are in power, both on Capitol Hill and around the country. So they're really the ones writing the script right now.
We heard the president, when he was campaigning, use that phrase, soul of America, and he campaigned as somebody who could reconcile the political divisions in America. But he's got this more combative tone over the past few weeks, Nancy.
Right.
Is that intentional?
It is intentional. In fact, I asked the White House press secretary yesterday what the White House thinks about this criticism that has been leveled at them by many Republicans in the past week, that for someone who ran as a unifier, calling people out as semi-fascists doesn't seem very unifying. And her very quick response was that, yes, his goal is to unify the American people, but he's not going to stop calling out what he views as troubling messaging on the part of MAGA leaders. She pointed to the fact that in recent days there have been attacks on law enforcement throughout the country. She even pointed to a comment that was made by President Biden's one-time friend, Lindsey Graham, the Republican senator from South Carolina, who said that if former President Trump were to be charged, that there would be riots in the streets. That's the kind of thing that the White House and this president are talking about when they say that violent language is creating sort of a permission structure for some of the more imbalanced individuals who follow President Trump to act out. I was talking to an elections official here in Philadelphia today, Scott, who said she has changed her routine. She now doesn't go as many places on her own. She's careful about who she spends time with because she has gotten death threats. This is a job that used to be seen as more or less mundane. Now she's getting threatened for what she does because President Trump lost the state of Pennsylvania in 2020. And so here at Independence Hall, the cradle of democracy, President Biden is going to argue that this is more than just rhetoric. This is the kind of thing that, if left unchecked, could really harm the democratic system that Americans have come to rely on.
You mentioned that location, Independence Hall. What a beautiful spot. What a beautiful night for this event. This was a strategic choice, obviously.
Obviously, I mean, yes, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution were debated and signed here, but perhaps just as importantly, we are located in Philadelphia, in the great battleground state of Pennsylvania. This is a state that President Biden is visiting 3 times just in a 1-week period. You've got a very hotly contested governor's race here, a very hotly contested Senate race here that could help determine whether Democrats or Republicans control the Senate come this fall. President Biden has seen his own approval ratings rise over the past couple of weeks after a string of legislative wins, so he may feel that he now has a little more leeway to get out on the trail and make some of these more pointed arguments than he would have even a few weeks ago when he was trying to cut deals with Republicans in Congress.
He and you have many more Pennsylvania trips likely ahead between now and the midterms. Nancy Cordes, Philadelphia. Thank you.
You're welcome.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
This place is at the very tip of the spear when it comes to Satanism and witchcraft and demonism.
Has the church been this divided?
Not in my lifetime. They've been radicalized in their approach to politics.
United in Christ, divided by politics.
We have what I call a cowardly pastor problem because they don't want to get involved in the political situation.
Conservative Christianity and Republicanism have grasped hands in a way that's very unhealthy.
There are churches whose members have divided over partisan politics.
How an evangelical civil war could change the spirit of America.
This was a heavily Christian-influenced attack.
When we have the ability to say that God is on our side, it allows us to justify all kinds of cruelty.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared. People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it. We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Former New York police officer and U.S. Marine Thomas Webster has been sentenced to 10 years in prison for his role in the U.S. Capitol attack. The sentence is the longest handed down so far in those cases, as prosecutors make their way through hundreds of January 6 prosecutions. Officials say Webster brought weapons to the Capitol and wore body armor on the day of the insurrection. He then violently attacked a D.C. police officer and was convicted on 6 counts in May. 5 of them were felonies. Prosecutors had requested a sentence of 17 years. A lawyer for the far-right group, the Oath Keepers, has also been arrested in connection with the January 6th Capitol riot. The Department of Justice says Kelly Sorrell is facing charges including conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding and others. She's a close associate of Oath Keepers leader Stewart Rhodes, who is now just weeks away from his trial on seditious conspiracy charges. Authorities say Sorrell was present at a meeting the night before the riot with Rhodes and the leaders of other groups. Dozens of migrants arrived by bus in Chicago Wednesday after being sent there by Texas Governor Greg Abbott. The mayor's office says Chicago has welcomed the migrants and the city will make sure they receive shelter and food. It's the latest in a border policy move by Governor Abbott across the country. He says Chicago will now become a drop-off location, just like New York City and Washington, D.C. For more on this, CBS News immigration reporter Camilo Montoyo Galvez joins us now. So what can you tell us about these migrants who are being bused from Texas and from Arizona all across the country, and why is it happening?
Hi, Scott. These are migrants who entered the U.S. unlawfully along the U.S.-Mexico border, and then they were offered transportation by officials in Texas and Arizona after they were processed by Customs and Border Protection, an agency that released them and allowed them to continue their immigration or asylum cases here in the U.S. And this is because the Biden administration, Scott, has really not relied on detention to monitor migrants. It has allowed many of the migrants who are not expelled to Mexico under the Title 42 pandemic restrictions to continue their cases under GPS monitors or other tracking devices to supervise them. And in regards to your second question, I think the Republican governors in Texas and Arizona would argue that this busing operation is a way for Democratic-led cities to share the burden of accommodating these large numbers of migrants, which they believe has really fallen on small communities in their border states. But obviously, the Biden administration, Scott, has called this a political stunt. Advocates have also forcefully denounced this operation, saying that migrants are effectively being used as political pawns in a policy dispute between the administration and these Republican-led states.
How are the cities responding?
Excellent question. So we know that the bulk of the reception work in both Washington, D.C., New York City, and now Chicago is being led by local organizations and groups. We know that FEMA, a federal agency, is reimbursing some of these groups, especially in Washington, D.C., but we also know, Scott, that in both New York and D.C., the mayors there have asked the Biden administration for more assistance to receive and accommodate and shelter these migrants. And even in D.C., the mayor has asked the National Guard for assistance twice. But those 2 requests were denied by the Department of Defense, and that has really placed the administration in a pretty awkward position. And really, there's really no sign that this is going to stop anytime soon. And I think this political battle over border policy between these Republican-led states and the administration will only continue to intensify.
You also have new reporting on Afghan refugees. Tell us about that.
Yes, so the Biden administration has announced that it will have a new policy for the resettlement of Afghan evacuees in October during the start of fiscal year 2023. That is when they will launch Operation Enduring Welcome, which was the new successor to Operation Allies Welcome, which was the operation under which about 86,000 Afghans were resettled here in the U.S. after the Taliban takeover of the country. The main policy change here, Scott, is that the U.S. will no longer rely on a humanitarian parole authority that allows officials to bypass the years-long visa and refugee process to quickly admit and process immigrants. Instead, the administration will now focus on using refugee status and visa petitions to process and admit three specific groups of Afghans: those with immediate relatives here in the U.S., special immigrant visa holders who assisted the U.S. war effort, and the most vulnerable refugee applicants. And the main objective behind this change, according to the administration, Scott, is that they want future Afghan arrivals to come here with a durable, permanent legal status. And that is because parole allows beneficiaries to live and work here legally, but it does not place them on a pathway to U.S. citizenship. So many of those evacuees who have been resettled over the past year are now in legal limbo because they only have this temporary permission to stay in the country.
What's the status of the tens of thousands of Afghan evacuees already here?
Yes, so 86,000 Afghan evacuees have already been brought to the U.S. Over 90% of them, Scott, have already joined their new communities here in the U.S., and they're enrolling their children in schools here, they're learning English, and they're getting help from resettlement organizations that are helping them integrate into American society. But many of them, like I mentioned, are now in legal limbo because most of these Afghans were paroled into the country, and parole, again, is a temporary permission to work and stay in the U.S. for 2 years, but it does not provide them a pathway to permanent residency or a green card or ultimately U.S. citizenship. So they will stay in limbo, Scott, unless they win asylum or Congress passes the recently introduced Afghan Adjustment Act, which would allow these evacuees to get these green cards or permanent residency.
Camilo Montoya Galvez, we appreciate your reporting. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, Scott.
You've likely heard a lot about the former president's request for a special master. But what does one actually do? And what kind of cases are they used for? We'll break that down for you and give you the latest on the face-off between former President Trump and the Department of Justice. You're streaming Red and Blue.
Original CBS Reports documentary.
This place is at the very tip of the spear when it comes to Satanism and witchcraft and demonism.
Has the church been this divided?
Not in my lifetime. They've been radicalized in their approach to politics.
United in Christ, divided by politics.
We have what I call a cowardly pastor problem because they don't want to get involved in the political situation.
Conservative Christianity and Republicanism have grasped hands in a way that's very unhealthy.
There are churches whose members have divided over partisan politics.
How an evangelical civil war could change the spirit of America.
This was a heavily Christian-influenced attack.
When we have the ability to say that God is on our side, it allows us to justify all kinds of cruelty.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging winds.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared. People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We
God. We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Scott McFarland. Here's a look at some of our top stories. Ginny Thomas pressured at least 2 Wisconsin lawmakers to overturn the results of the 2020 election, according to emails first obtained by the Washington Post. The conservative activist and wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas apparently used an online platform which generated pre-written emails to multiple elected officials. Plus, Senator Lindsey Graham has been ordered to appear before a Georgia special grand jury investigating potential 2020 election interference. A federal judge also ruled Graham can't be questioned about so-called investigatory fact-finding, phone calls he made to state election officials. Plus, a federal judge says she will decide in due course whether to appoint a third-party observer, a so-called special master, to review confidential files seized from Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago property in August. In Thursday's hearing, lawyers for the former president argued an outside party would increase trust in the investigation. For more on what goes into the role of a special master, CBS News' Tanya Rivero explains.
Hey, Scott. So special masters have become more common over the last few years. But what exactly are they? Well, you can think of them as something like a chaperone for a complex case. It is that person's job to help guide the case through the court system. They're an expert in a specific type of case law or act as a mediator between both parties in a lawsuit. They add oversight to complicated cases a judge might not have enough background knowledge in or the time needed to monitor every development. Now, special masters do not replace a judge, but instead are an assistant to the court. Their powers are limited to activities like providing expertise on sensitive documents or managing payments in complicated settlement decisions. They used to be less common 20 years ago. Only about 2 out of 1,000 cases involved a special master. In 2003, federal law was amended to make it easier to appoint them. They've been involved in everything from distributing settlement funds to victims of 9/11 to managing the discovery phase during the multi-state opioid drug trials, to providing expertise about documents seized during the federal government's investigation against former Trump attorney Michael Cohen. Now, if appointed, the Mar-a-Lago documents case special master would possess an expertise in attorney-client privilege, as well as a high security clearance to review those sensitive documents and act as an impartial advisor on what can be included in the case. Scott?
Tanya Rivero, thank you very much. For more on this federal court case and special master hearing today, CBS News senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge joins us now. Catherine, the Department of Justice seemed to leave a door open to a special master in their court filing. What were they asking for?
Well, Scott, that's right. You'll recall in court, the Trump legal team said they felt a special master was necessary, in their words, to lower the temperature in the case. And in that filing, the Justice Department did leave the door open to the appointment of a special master, even though they had pushed back hard against it. They laid out a number of factors. First, they said that any list of potential special masters must be agreed upon by the Justice Department and the Trump legal team. They also asked that if there was a special master, that they give what amounts to a sworn statement indicating if they have any potential conflicts of interest or any biases that could somehow taint the process. And lastly, they asked that the individual would have to have a very high-level security clearance, because even though they're looking at paperwork that's related to matters of privilege, they're going to have to sift through documents, which we all know is well established that many of them were marked top secret or above. So if the special master goes ahead, the Justice Department argument, and I think it's a well-founded argument, is that it would really start to slow down the process. Scott.
And the Justice Department has agreed, or I'm sorry, the judge actually has agreed to unseal the inventory. What do we expect that inventory to show?
Well, I think the best way to describe it is, think about this receipt for the material seized from Mar-a-Lago that was recently unsealed by the court. There are about 30 sections here. You can think about this as kind of the skeleton of what was seized. So in this more detailed accounting, we can expect that skeleton to sort of be fleshed out. So when it describes boxes of classified documents or documents marked secret, there may be a fuller inventory of what specifically was in that box. There are a lot of references to binders with photos. So what exactly were the nature of those photos? So again, it's like a skeleton, and then it would be fleshed out by this inventory when it's released.
And Catherine, the National Archives flagged a potential violation of Section 2071 to the Justice Department. What is that? What more can you tell us about that?
Well, it's 18 U.S.C. 2071, and it's a criminal statute, and it basically finds that you break the law when you conceal, you remove, or you mutilate government records. And there's a legal school of thought that if a prosecution was pursued under 18 U.S.C. 2071, it would get around some of these issues regarding presidential records. So bottom line, anyone who takes a government record, they conceal a government record, they somehow mutilate or destroy a government record would be in violation of this criminal statute.
Here in Washington tonight, Catherine Herridge. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
A new federal study finds math and reading scores for 9-year-olds declined significantly since the start of the pandemic. The decline spanned across almost all races and all income levels. But students of color saw some of the sharpest decreases, widening the already existing disparity there. The drop in reading scores were the largest in more than 30 years. Sarah Palin's return to politics will have to wait at least a few more months. How an Alaska Democrat made history in many ways with a special election victory there, and why one prominent GOP senator is crying foul. You're streaming Red and Blue.
Original CBS Reports documentary.
This place is at the very tip of the spear when it comes to Satanism and witchcraft and demonism.
Has the church been this divided?
Not in my lifetime. They've been radicalized in their approach to politics.
United in Christ, divided by politics.
We have what I call a cowardly pastor problem because they don't want to get involved in the political situation.
Conservative Christianity and Republicanism have grasped hands in a way that's very unhealthy.
There are churches whose members have divided over partisan politics.
How an evangelical civil war could change the spirit of America.
This was a heavily Christian-influenced attack.
When we have the ability to say that God is on our side, it allows us to justify all kinds of cruelty.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging winds.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared. People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We
God. We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin's attempt to return to the political stage hit a roadblock. Named Mary Peltola. The Democrats' victory is the first for someone in her party in Alaska in 50 years. She's also the first native Alaskan to win the special election for Alaska's only House seat. Peltola will serve the remaining months of the late Congressman Don Young's term after Young died in March. She'll be the first Alaskan native to serve in the U.S. House and the first woman to take the seat. Peltola's win flips a seat, for now, at least pending November's general election. That seat had long been held by Republican lawmakers. Reporter Nathaniel Hurst has been all over this race, and he joins us now from Anchorage. He's also the author of an article appearing in the Washington Post Wednesday describing the significance of this win and the complicated voting process that got us there. Let's start with the complicated stuff, Nathaniel. Without getting too bogged down in the math, which is easy with ranked choice voting, give us a thumbnail of how this ranked choice voting played out in this particular election.
Yeah, I think complicated is a little bit of a loaded term. So personally, I would shy away from it here. I mean, I think ultimately this really was just a two-step process, right? So voters in this system were asked to rank candidates, but there were only 3 candidates in the general election. So really it was you rank your first choice candidate. And if your first choice candidate finishes last, then your second choice vote gets redistributed to the 2 remaining candidates. In this case, Mary Peltola was leading after the first round of voting. Nick Begich finished last. He was the second of 2 Republicans in the race. His votes were redistributed, and about half of them went to Sarah Palin, which was enough to get her close to Mary Peltola, but not close enough. And, you know, the big takeaway yesterday was that again, while half of Nick Begich's voters ranked Palin second, 30% ranked a Democrat second, which was really surprising because Nick Begich is a Republican, and then 20% didn't rank anyone at all. And so, you know, chose to not rank a second choice over ranking Palin. There's a lot of speculation about, you know, why that might be. Is it because a lot of Alaska voters, as polls have shown, have a negative view of Palin? Is it because Begich and Palin were attacking each other left and right on the campaign trail and kind of lowering the likelihood that their voters might vote for each other second? But, you know, in the end, that was the result. Mary Peltola pulls out a really close win.
Well, Peltola only wins this seat for a few months. Could we see the same matchup in the general election in November?
Yeah, not only we can, but we will. Those 3 candidates that were on this special election ballot, Nick Begich, Mary Peltola, Sarah Palin, they are on the general election ballot along with a libertarian candidate, Chris Buys. So basically, we're going to see a repeat of this in 2 months. And, you know, the big question now is what's going to be different between now and then? Our big national groups, which largely stayed out of this race, are they now going to jump in? Are the candidates going to campaign differently? Are people going to maybe embrace ranked choice voting a little more seriously now that they know what can happen when maybe they don't? And yeah, those are some of the big questions I think we'll be looking to see what happens over the next couple months.
Well, with this victory, she really makes history on 3 different fronts. I mean, as a woman, as a native Alaskan, as a Democrat winning statewide in Alaska. What does that tell us about the political climate at this moment in Alaska?
You know, it's been about, I think, 20 hours since this happened. And I think a lot of people are trying to draw a lot of conclusions. I mean, I think certainly it is historic to have Alaska's first Indigenous member of Congress, although I would stress that Mary really did not run as the Alaska Native candidate. You know, she ran as a candidate really for rural Alaska, for some of the remote communities that, you know, don't have road access, may not have good broadband access, are seeing impacts from climate change and crashes in salmon returns. I think, also, again, the seat was held by a Republican for almost 50 years in Don Young. But, whether this is about kind of demographic or political shifts in Alaska, about kind of national trends, the Biden agenda, whatever, I think, then there's the whole complicating factor of ranked choice voting. So I think it's too soon to really draw any kind of sweeping conclusion about what this means. But I think we know that all those strands were there as Alaskans were going to the ballot box last month.
Arkansas Republican Senator Tom Cotton almost immediately called the election fraudulent. What are these critics basing the criticism on?
Look, I mean, people say it's confusing. There have been sort of intimations that, I think Tom Cotton said it's a scam. I think in Alaska, largely so far, we have seen folks criticizing the system without doing the sort of Trump questioning the validity of the results. But I think, the main thing about the new election system here is that it eliminates the partisan primary. So no longer do Republican candidates all go up against each other in a primary and you get a single Republican in the general election. Now you can have two Republicans in a general election, and that actually might make it harder for a Republican to win because you have people splitting votes, and then voters may not rank a candidate second. So I think, there's a distinction here between is the system somehow, fraudulent or broken versus does it not get the outcome that you want? And the political scientists that I've talked to about this say, the election architecture and framework is ultimately just as much a part of our sort of political coalition political system. It's a thing you can change to advantage or disadvantage certain factions of voters. And so I think, whether even this system really does disadvantage Republicans, I think remains to be seen. This is a single election, a single data point. We're going to see the system used in dozens more legislative elections this fall. But, certainly there has been a lot of criticism, particularly by Republicans in Alaska, that this system is not needed, it's confusing, et cetera. And so, ultimately, this was a system that Alaska voters narrowly approved in 2020 in a ballot initiative. And, if the legislature wants to go ahead and get rid of it next year, or someone wants to do another initiative to get rid of it, that's always on the table. But, that's going to have to survive the will of the Alaska public to keep it. So we'll see.
Nathaniel Hers, good work covering this, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to take a quick break, but now's a good time to remind you can stay up to date by downloading our CBS News app. You can catch live local coverage from across the country from all of our CBS stations. Stay with us. You're streaming CBS News.
Original CBS Reports documentary.
This place is at the very tip of the spear when it comes to Satanism and witchcraft and demonism.
Has the church been this divided?
Not in my lifetime. They've been radicalized in their approach to politics.
United in Christ, divided by politics.
We have what I call a cowardly pastor problem because they don't want to get involved in the political situation.
Conservative Christianity and Republicanism have grasped hands in a way that's very unhealthy.
There are churches whose members have divided over partisan politics.
How an evangelical civil war could change the spirit of America.
This was a heavily Christian-influenced attack.
When we have the ability to say that God is on our side, it allows us to justify all kinds of cruelty.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging winds.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared. People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Twitter announced Thursday it's testing a new feature which allows users to edit tweets after they've been posted. Under the new feature, users can only alter tweets in the first 30 minutes after they're posted. Edited tweets will have a label showing they were modified. Twitter employees will be first to gain access to the feature, and the company says it does plan to eventually give the option to all Twitter users, but did not specify when. That does it for today. You can stream Red and Blue Monday to Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And a reminder, if you want to watch previous episodes of the program, you can see them anytime on the CBS News website. Just head to cbsnews.com/red and blue.
Original CBS Reports documentary.
This place is at the very tip of the spear when it comes to Satanism and witchcraft and demonism.
Has the church been this divided?
Not in my lifetime. They've been radicalized in their approach to